Welcome to The Business of Travel, the official podcast of the Global Business Travel Association. I'm Jason Long, SVP of Global Business Development at HRS. But also, I'm a member of the GBTA EMEA Meeting and Events Committee, and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today's episode is entitled Smarter Meetings Management, with a particular focus on technology. Despite representing the majority of meeting volume, simple meetings remain the least controlled category in most organizations. In fact, there isn't much that is smart about it. Manual RFPs, untraceable payments, and compliance blind spots risk financial leakage for corporations and, perhaps more worryingly, complete lack of transparency. In this episode, I'll be speaking with Gill, Senior Global Director at BCD Meetings and Events. Together, we'll examine the simple meetings market and explore how technology can play its part in controlling this often overlooked category. Gill, thanks for your time and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me. Nice to be here.
Firstly, before we get into the subject at hand, why don't you give the audience a little bit about your current role at BCD and also your general experience in the industry?
Sure. Well, I haven't been with BCD very long. I'm just about hitting my 6-month mark. And I joined to basically lead and implement a global strategic meetings account that BCD M&E won alongside travel for a big global corporate pharmaceutical client. So my life right now is very much all about implementing new markets, new countries as we kind of expand the program out across the globe. But my background really is purely meetings and events. I've worked in the industry for over 20 years, starting out in the communications side of the business, working on government events, and then working in the events team on incentive and live events, and then kind of progressing into account management globally, sales, account management, marketing, and then kind of back to global account management as I am today. So kind of done a little bit of everything, dipped my fingers in all of the different oceans of meetings and events and that crazy world that it is. So it's good to be here.
Okay. Great. Completely overqualified for this subject matter, but let's get stuck in straight away. Why don't you share with the audience how you think clients are dealing with simple and smaller meetings? In fact, it might be even helpful to the audience to ensure we're using the correct and same terminology. What is a simple meeting? What is a small meeting? Are they the same? Are they different?
I don't think anybody's worked that out yet. I've got to be honest. Everybody's got their own definitions. Everybody says it however they like it. I don't think there is one set global standard in play. I think people kind of mix and merge between small and simple. I think both are kind of available to be with the technology and the automation and the tools that we have in play today. But I think it's really about the need of the business. So it's to what you said earlier, it's about that lack of visibility to what is quite a big spend across an organization. It can be half of a global, meeting program spend is what's classed as small or simple meetings. It's about making sure, in my opinion, making sure you've got your set definition. It's your policy. It meets your business needs and your company's needs as to how you define it, really. And it should be fluid. A small meeting for one organization is very different from a small meeting from another organization. A small meeting in the US is very different from a small meeting in Norway, for example, just purely because of the size and scale of the countries as well as the businesses. So it really does need to be fluid.
Right. So you mentioned that some organizations spend 50% on small meetings. I would say from a transactional point of view, some of the research that we've done in the market, from a transactional point of view, even more transactions related to simple meetings, up to 70%. We have to acknowledge that some of the bigger meetings and events and the global sales conferences where the CEO is there and you need production and apps for the traveler attendee management and things, they consume a lot of spend. But actually, when you look at the more, let's call it the more simple and smaller meetings, we're talking about anything under 50 people or so, where you just need a venue, some breakout rooms, some food and beverage. Those can be quite significant in terms of volume. but their spend isn't as big. What we see, roughly €10,000 on average per booking. But that's still a significant spend, as you mentioned, goes completely unmanaged. When you work with your clients and in the past, what have you seen? How are they addressing the small meetings? How are they actually reserving those venues?
Well, I think a lot of people still have a variety of different ways that they're booking. I think there's still very much using the agencies today as we are being used across the teams globally. I think there is still a demand for that expert advice, getting on the phone, talking to somebody. And so there's a lot of agencies being used to book those small and simple meetings today. I think there's a slow increase and a slow kind of uptake of the technology tools. And there's such a variety of small meetings tools and simple meetings tools and tech out there. I think it's great that there is such a variety because it gives people choice, and there are definitely visible increases in the uptake of people using the online tools, particularly those that have the live and the instant availability and live booking options and pricing available. But I still think there's a lot of do it yourself. I think a lot of the small medium enterprises, they've got, very infrequent meeting bookers, and that's just somebody who is going online straight onto Google, or hopefully now an AI tool of some variety to do their research themselves, to find their own space and to book their meetings with very little knowledge and understanding of the industry, of compliance, of cancellation terms and policies, and at greater risk to their business.
Right. Okay, so let me pick some of that apart. A lot of organizations or individuals, executive assistants, admins doing it themselves with Google or whatever, a telephone, a fax maybe, often makes it a small proportion, perhaps using some of the new technology and tools that are coming on the market, but also still a lot of interaction with the agency. Again, the very manual process. So I guess the conclusion here is there is a huge opportunity for technology to automate and streamline this particular category.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think with the advancements of AI that we're seeing today, I think that's only going to grow much more exponentially. I feel like the events industry is a little bit slow to take up tools and technology and AI and use automation in the way it should be. I feel like there's still a lot of people out there using their Excel spreadsheets and things like that. But yeah, I do think the opportunity is there. I think especially as more of the younger generations come on board who want that instant result, instant access, I feel like they're the ones that will start to take up that choice of the technology and the AI options that are out there.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. That's interesting to me because it's the second podcast I've hosted in the area of simple meetings, and it's the second time Excel has come up as a tool in this process, which has got to be wrong, right? In 2026, you mentioned AI. Any novice to AI will tell you that AI works, or the quality of AI is based on the data beneath it. But I do know my personal observations in meetings and events, as we've alluded to already, is when it comes to simple meetings, it's very difficult for corporations to even find what they're spending on meetings. So what have you seen? How are corporations coming to terms with that? Where are they getting their data from? What do you think will happen in the future?
Yeah, I think it is very, very difficult to get your hands around it. I think it's almost like it's the biggest challenge to tackle. So therefore, most people are happy to just tuck it in under a pile of paperwork at the corner of their desk and think I'll worry about that another time. Those that are tackling it are looking at it in a variety of different ways. Like have worked with a lot of global corporate enterprise clients. Most of them have a big procurement or travel management division who are ultimately responsible for gaining that visibility and putting governance and policy into place. So they're looking at the variety of different solutions that they've got in place. I don't think there is one global tool that fits anybody's needs right now. I think there's great tools. They're all kind of working locally and regionally quite well, but I don't think there's really one global tool that's absolutely hit the mark. It's a bit of a race to the finish line for those that are closest. So it's interesting to watch that play out and see how quickly everybody is developing. But I think everybody is taking the approach that best fits their corporate values, their corporate culture. That's what's going to build the compliance and convince people to actually use the tool and see the values and the benefits. Basically, it needs to be easy. It needs to give people choice. It needs to give the corporate and the travel management team the governance and the visibility. But if it's too difficult, if it's too complicated, if they've got a mix of a variety of different tools, if you need to go and use X tool in Finland and Y tool in South America and another tool in Australia, then it becomes far too overcomplicated and people just aren't going to use it. So it's a balance of ease of use plus visibility for the stakeholders that need that as well.
Yeah, a lot of fragmentation there, especially across markets, different suppliers, different tools, different technologies. I think as the industry advances in terms of technology, the key for success will be interoperability, open APIs to connect a lot of these technology stacks together to share data. Because once you can share data, then AI can do its great work and start to optimize. You did mention some organizational side of the corporates where they have their traditional, let's call it the traditional transient teams managing the regular business travel. But I do know there's a lot of organizations that have separate meetings and events teams as well. In my experience, quite a lot of the time, they're not working together. They're not even falling in the same units or areas. Do you see that? Or is there now a convergence to bring that together? What's your opinion there?
Difficult for me to comment on that one. I can tell you that my one client that I'm working with today it is two separate teams, but very much working together. And we do the same on our side as well. So we try to mirror the setup that they have in place to ensure that there is that alignment across travel and meetings, regardless of whose bucket it sits in, within the client's organization side of things, because it is very different, but there's also crossover and oftentimes the leadership want to see that spend managed across travel and meetings. They want to see that total cost of ownership across both categories. So you need to have some tie-up at the top level where at the same time, they're so different.
Yeah, from my experience, I still think generally travel as opposed to meetings and events tend to be managed separately by organizations, but there is a willingness to try and bring that together. I mean, one very tangible benefit to bring that spend and data together is then to use the one technology platform to start procuring and sourcing with venues. We know in our own company, our clients, 50% of their meeting spend tends to fall into their transient hotels that they've already negotiated with, for example. So to show that particular supplier, to show that venue that you are spending more in it can only increase your negotiation power and your ability to get better deals, better experiences for some of the attendees to the meetings as well. So I think that's a trend that we'll see moving forwards.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to your own world and your own experiences, Gill, I was curious to know if you've seen any clients adopt new technologies in the world of meetings and events and got any particular gains from that.
I think the best case examples that I've seen is where they have a really robust technology stack with everything talking to each other. So they've got an online meetings tool that some markets are using. They've got a global technology tool that most markets are using with their agencies to feed into. They've got preferred supplier programs in place with their different hotel chains across travel and meetings. And at the back end, they've got a data set that is pulling all of that data together to give them the stories that they need to be able to drive the evolution of their travel and meetings programs. Like that's where I've seen it in the absolute best case is to your point earlier. It's about integration and making sure that they haven't got a fragmented program with different data sets and different sources of information here, there and everywhere that they can't tie together to help them negotiate with their suppliers as best as they possibly can do. I think that's where I'll see corporates and companies evolve is using that data to drive better negotiations with their partners.
Sure. Actually, that's a nice segue into the next question I wanted to ask you about payment and invoicing. We've seen a centralization of payment over recent years in the transient world where travelers don't need to get their credit cards out anymore in hotels to pay for it themselves. In the meetings world, it's a bit more fragmented. We're still seeing bank transfers. We're seeing the boss's credit card being used. We're seeing cash paid to certain venues as well. Do you see optimization with technology in the area of payments for meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my clients are really far advanced in that sense. We have all of our teams use a virtual meetings card, a virtual card for all of our meetings and events activity for them across the globe, wherever it's possible to do that. There are obviously some markets that aren't quite as far ahead, and we are still in purchase order world, but again, yeah, it's a much simpler way for anybody to gain visibility and oversight into what that spend is. And actually, it's also a really good way if you haven't got one single central source that everyone's booking their small meetings through. If you've got a virtual card technology solution and people can raise a card every time they need to book their own small meetings venue or simple meeting that they've got, then that's one way that finance or procurement can actually get some insight and some oversight as to what's happening across the board.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very quick win, I think, for any corporate to centralize on payments to get that access. Of course, what is paid on a virtual credit card doesn't necessarily equate to what was actually consumed in the premise. So to get hold of the invoice and actually check that invoice against what was contracted is very important. And again, we know from our own research that roughly 20% of invoices with respect to meetings actually do not reflect what was consumed in the hotel or the venue, does not reflect what was contracted. So I guess there's a huge opportunity for technology to step in there and do some of these checks on behalf of the corporate.
I think that would really help. I think that whole miscellaneous line item on budgets is probably the bane of most people's lives if they work in the world of finance or procurement, I've got to say.
Yeah, those extra coffees can add up. Okay, so listen, Gill, we're really getting towards the end of this podcast. So far, it's been absolutely great. Just one last comment from your side. Interested in any mistakes you might have seen companies do when it comes to meetings management, or any advice with respect to what you think our audience and listeners should avoid?
I think setting too many rules and restrictions just puts people off. I think giving people choice and being a bit more flexible is what's going to gain momentum and ensure that you get that growth and that actual desire to use a tool. I think a lot of people did adopt a tool too early and try to customize it and over customize it into, well, we do it this way and we have to do it this way, rather than saying, okay, this is a new tool. Let's try a new methodology. Let's give people a little bit more flexibility and that will help adoption. I think was very much a hindrance rather than a help by setting far too many customizations right at the start when the tools and the technology was still new, and it was still very much let's try it and develop it and keep changing it. And it's still that way now. Giving a bit more flexibility and understanding that these tools are new and are developing and being willing to develop with them, I think enables a lot better and a lot quicker and a more efficient adoption.
Yeah, that's great advice. I can understand that if you over customize something for your own needs, then any new feature or product or service that comes out in the market by these great tech providers, it will be difficult to actually map that into your environment because you've got such a heavily customized and bespoke solution there. Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, listen, Gill, unfortunately, we've run out of time. So thank you very much for your time and also your ability to make complex things sound really simple and interesting. That's a great insight for our listeners. Thank you. And with that, that's the end. So you've been listening to The Business of Travel, the official podcast of the Global Business Travel Association. For more information about GBTA, please check out gbta.org. And last but not least, please check out and review the podcast. We do look at the feedback to make sure that the next one is even better. Thank you for listening.